Welcome back to the Flex Diet Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike T. Nelson. On this podcast, we talk about all things to help increase muscle, increase performance, improve body composition, do all of it in a flexible framework without destroying your health. Today on the podcast, we've got Dr. Jeff Rouse from Shiftwave, and I am super excited to have him on the podcast. This was a really super interesting discussion, and you're probably first wondering, what the heck is a Shiftwave device? I first saw it at the Parker University conference back in March, and I usually go to a lot of these conferences, and the conference was great. I loved it. It was super fun, but in the vendor area, lots of crazy claims a lot of times, and I saw a claim about resetting your nervous system. I was like, oh, that's interesting. But in all honesty, I've been pretty disappointed by that tagline many times before. But I thought, I don't know, these guys look cool. I'll check it out. And I tested out the device for just 10 minutes. And I was like, wow, you could actually feel a pretty big difference. And so I got my wife and snuck her into the conference the next day, and I had her try it, and she really liked it. And I talked to the guy there, so shout out to David for answering all my crazy questions on stuff, and I was super impressed. I talked to some other people who had done some work with them, and they all enjoyed it also. So fast forward several months, and I've been able to test out the device now for about 6 weeks as of recording, and it's been really awesome. It's been super helpful. And we'll talk all about that in the podcast. Everything from what is actually Shiftwave, how did it start, what are some of the principles behind it. We even have little rabbit trails about sleep, downregulation, the different protocols that they have, like synthetic sleep protocols, how you would use this for athletes. And then a lot of this is also on just general concepts too, even if you don't have a Shiftwave chair. Things like vagal nerve stimulation for cognitive enhancement, how you can produce different states of downregulation, both using technology and not using technology. I really enjoyed this podcast with Dr. Jeff. He is a triple board certified psychiatrist with training in quantum biology and longevity medicine, advanced trauma recovery, neuropsychiatry, and wellness technology in both clinical, military, and humanitarian settings. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I think you will too. In terms of sponsors, if you're interested in all things to improve performance, body comp, add muscle, check out my newsletter. I've got a ton of stuff that goes out on a daily basis. Go to MikeTNelson.com. You'll see a little sign there at the top that says newsletter. You can hop on there for free. I'll send you a cool gift also. And then if you have any questions, that's probably the best way to contact me also. And then this is also brought to you by Shiftwave. So when I reached out to them to do this podcast, I did not have any affiliation with them at all. Actually, up until just yesterday, I did not have any affiliation with them. I really love the device, and I've done a bunch of demos in my area too for different professionals. And it was one of the rare things where you can put someone in a more passive delivery device, and it actually works really well. So I was super excited about that and wanted to help them out. But I did sign up to be an affiliate because I liked it so much. So I am an affiliate, so I do make a few clams if you sign up through my link down below, which we'll put here. And yeah, it's been super beneficial. It is an expensive device. It is not cheap by any stretch of the imagination, but again, I have found it to be super beneficial. So if you are interested, you can reach out to me. Go to the link down below. Happy to answer any of your questions. If I'm not able to answer them, I can definitely get you the right person to get an answer. So without further ado, enjoy this podcast with Dr. Jeff Rouse from Shiftwave. Welcome to the podcast. How are you today, Dr. Jeff?
I am well, honored and stoked to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate all your time. I know you're super busy. And you work for Shiftwave, and one of the big questions is what the heck is Shiftwave and how do you explain it to people who haven't felt it? Like I've had the luxury of using the device now for about 4 weeks, and even when I've been doing demos and stuff for people, they're like, "What is it? Why should I do a demo on it?" I'm just like, just give me 10 minutes. I'll bring it over to your house. You'll just try it.
Uh, no, said it is something to experience right off the bat, but we can go into a little bit how I objectively explain it
Yes, please.
for sure. A couple of different ways I can do this, but yes, I'm Dr. Jeff Rouse. I'm honored and lucky to be the Chief Medical Officer at Shiftwave, and I've been with the company for a little over 5 years at this point in the development stages, the early prototyping stages, and then as we brought our findings out into the world in the form of a product. And what Shiftwave is simply is a device that was created in a psychophysiology laboratory that uses specific patterns of physical vibration that we have seen in our lab create shifts in the psychophysiological state of the person. Now, that's a bit of a geeky way of explaining it. What's another way to explain it? Basically, we combine the best of whole body vibration and similar things like heart rate variability, biofeedback, breath work, and other modalities all in one package to provide a deep, rapid, and profound experience in shifting the state of the nervous system. One other way to explain it that I've come across is this. We spend a lot of time, especially in the modern world, using our eyes, using our visual system, our ears. But the way we're wired is actually we're wired for touch. We're wired for physical somatic sensation. And we're a bit deprived in that in modern times. But that's the fail-safe method by which we learn in utero and in our early years. That's the fail-safe method by which we learn that we're okay and everything's safe. For example, when a grandmother wants to calm a 1-year-old who's freaking out in the grocery store, she could try to sing a lullaby. She could try to show her a little picture. But what she often does is she'll pick up that child, hold it, pat that child, rock it while bouncing, providing multiple patterns of physical, really vibratory input to that child. And that shifts the child, calms the child's nervous system. And that's essentially what we've sought to do with our Shiftwave device is provide a kind of a rapid way of providing a very similar experience for people that's accessible at the press of a button. So how about that? I know it's a
Yeah,
long
that's
explanation, but
no, that's great.
there's lots of detail and lots of levels here.
Yeah, I think that's great. And that matches my original experience. So when I first saw it at the Parker University conference this past March in Vegas, and they've got a ton of different vendors there, and you go by, and I'm just like, I'd never heard of it before. And I see the sign that says, reset your nervous system. And my first thought, in all honesty, was like, okay, like whatever. Like everybody claims to do this, but I'm like, I'll check it out. And the people are like, just try it for 10 minutes. And I'm like, okay, like 10 minutes, whatever. And it got done, and I was like, oh, holy crap. Like even in 10 minutes, like you could feel a difference. Like you could feel the kind of a little bit of that sympathetic rise. And then when it drops, it almost felt a little bit like that drop on a roller coaster. You could feel your whole body get calm. And that was the first time I would say with a very passive therapy device. Like the guy literally just put me in the chair, hit the button. Like there was no other intervention. He's not out there tweaking knobs or doing anything that I felt something like that in a very short order without any input from anyone else. And so I thought, wow, that's super impressive. Did not expect that to feel that much of a difference right away.
Yeah. That's a that's a very common reaction, and certainly the reaction I had years and years back when the team in its early investigations found me. They emailed me saying, "Hey, we're investigating the use of physical vibration to reset the brain, and we think we can reproduce some of the meditative experience through vibration. Would you like to try it?" That was a cold email that I, and to be blunt, I thought it was BS.
Yeah, because there's
I
so many people that claim that, and I've been so sorely disappointed most of the time, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. And so I ignored the email, but that was a couple of weeks before the COVID shutdown in
Mm,
2020. And I got to the point where I was just looking for something to do. So I decided I'm going to go through all of my old emails and clean up that mess. And I got to this one, and my curiosity or the universe or something tapped me on the shoulder and said, respond, go give it a try. And I did. So in the midst of COVID, and you remember those early days,
oh yeah,
that was a really stressful time, I think, for
very stressful.
every human on the planet. Like, how bad is this going to get? Is shipping going to stop? Where's our food going to come
Yeah, just
from?
so many unknowns.
Lots of unknowns. So I basically went and tried a very, very early version of the Shiftwave device. And my experience after a 15-minute session was very similar to what you described. And that is, it radically shifted my subjective experience of the tension in my mind, the tension in my muscles, the state of my body, my just my overall focus and concentration. And it did it in 15 minutes. And the only thing I could compare it to was that I'd had a decent amount of meditation experience. I would not say I am a master. I have fallen off that path many times, but I know what it's like after you've been had given the blessing of being able to do a meditation retreat. And this device put me in a very similar state as to what it feels like after a whole day in that meditation retreat. And so subjectively, I knew something was happening within me. It wasn't placebo, it was massive in its effect. And so that's how I got on board with the company, and I tried it, and then I ran a small pilot study at my university, and I saw that if you look at the brain imaging as well as the psychophysiology as well as the self-report data, that wasn't a unique experience to me. I wasn't a one-off. So when I took those 20 people and just did a very simple pilot study and saw that there were statistically significant changes in the psychophysiology, in the sympathetic nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, and people's report of stress, improved relaxation, reduced anxiety was not just subtle, it was significant. That's when I knew that this team was on to something, and then that's how I came aboard in the very, very beginning. A long explanation. I told you this is my favorite topic.
Yeah, yeah, we're all good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the many benefits to psychedelic therapy too, that it's one thing to have like a CBT type therapy, which has plenty of positive data behind it, but it's another thing under sort of the drug influence to have the sensation and the just a different feeling of somebody probably saying the exact same thing to you again. So I think there's this feeling is also believing. And when you feel something, and especially when you can feel that same thing repetitively, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, there's something going on.
No, right on. And all power to the many different ways that people have found to shift the nervous system. Truly, it's not just us. This is a large, in the wellness side of this, the healthcare side of this is large. Neuromodulation is a big field. But I think one of the advantages of Shiftwave is exactly what you're saying, and that is it's not subtle. And after even a single session, you can feel that shift. It's not the kind of thing where you get 2 or 3% better every single time you do it. And then after the course of a long-standing neurofeedback session or sessions, plural, You can see that your brain is starting to rebalance and you can see that your focus is getting better. It's not a top-down intervention. And I think that the top-down interventions that focus more on kind of the brain itself, they can be a bit subtle to our experience. There's great data behind neurofeedback and
Mm-hmm.
lots of all of that stuff. But nevertheless, we offer a different approach. And that is when you shift the state of the body, you rapidly shift the state of the nervous system. Yeah.
Yeah, the analogy I use, or I also look for therapies that can shift things more rapidly and safely. The analogy I use is that your nervous system is always being comparative. So I'm in recording this in Texas, but normally in living in Minnesota, it's pretty cold in the winter. So if you were sitting inside our townhouse, you're like, oh man, it's 65 degrees. It's freezing cold in here. But you go outside and it's 10 below Fahrenheit, and you walk in the door, you're like, oh my God, it's so warm in here. Because you literally went from 10 below Fahrenheit to 65. So your temperature swing was 75 degrees in just a matter of seconds. It's still the same internal temperature, but because you smashed that comparison so close from point A to point B, the relative difference you can feel. And that's kind of what I think about here is that the relative difference I could feel from, oh yeah, okay, I was stressed because, oh, this is what calm feels like now within a short period of time, not 6 months of therapy, which again, the other therapies, all those could be very beneficial, but I think the buy-in and the commitment level has to be higher because you're putting your faith in this sort of therapy and doing the work, and eventually you're like, oh yeah, I guess I'm better, versus, oh, I did this and within a few minutes I actually feel better. Okay, I'm probably more likely to stay with it because I can see and feel the benefit in a very, very short order.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And that is certainly one of our value adds as a wellness device out there in the world. And it's been interesting as we've been out there showing off what we've done and working with different partners who've bought Shiftwaves and are using them, is that we're seeing that benefit of the rapid and profound shift is being used in some very interesting ways in across industries. So for example, we've got some partners that use the Shiftwave chair as part of the psychedelic psychotherapy experience.
That was one of my questions.
Yeah, to help people kind of downshift from walking in off the street, to get that to prepare their psychophysiological set and setting for that psychedelic psychotherapy experience. We've also got some persons in that space that actually use the shift wave chair during the experience itself to help provide a kind of a holding container, a safe psychophysiological experience during the psychedelic experience. Others in the mental health space literally will use Shiftwave before a regular therapy session, whereby, for the same reason, rapidly shift a person, get them feeling calm, get them feeling centered, get them feeling centered in their body and centered in the room, so that then the other work can happen. And then outside of the realm of kind of treatment, we've got it's been an interesting ride with this company. We've gotten some really high profile persons using Shiftwave. And so we have NFL quarterbacks that are using Shiftwave before games to help reset their nervous system so that they can be out there on the field doing what they love and what they're paid to do.
JJ McCarthy, Minnesota Vikings now. I'm a big Vikings fan.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, it is very interesting to have seen this journey go from kind of like a garage and a lab all the way to watching a NFL quarterback with the shift wave in tow,
Yeah.
walking it into his locker room with
Yep.
ESPN covering it, saying, "What is this thing? This shift wave device?" So yeah, it's been an interesting journey, but I think that speaks to the power of what happens when you can provide a like a tangible change to people, because like we're creatures of reward.
Hmm.
Why do people smoke cigarettes? Why do people drink beer? They do it because there's kind of a quasi immediate change to their nervous system when people ingest chemicals. Why are they successful in, let's say, politics? Partly because they're able to connect with people and make other people feel seen, heard, and appreciated in a way that leaves them with a positive impression of that person. So we remember events, we remember things, but we really remember how we feel. That's a very deeply evolutionarily wired way that our memory is constructed. And so if you can leverage that for the good of humanity, why not? So that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I can't remember who said it, but you may forget what they said to you, but you very rarely forget how they made you feel.
Exactly.
Like we still remember the feelings more so than even just the words that were said.
Exactly. And I'm a psychiatrist by training.
Yeah.
And so that I can't help but see that in almost neurobiological terms, right? Every memory that we have of what has happened to us has actually kind of a tag associated to it, a color associated to it. And that color is literally how were we feeling at the time of that memory, which is a fancy way of saying what was the state of our body at the time that this happened. That's why in disorders like PTSD, you can have persons who have the slightest trigger of that memory, right? That then is associated and their body kicks into fight or flight. Their heart rate goes up, they get very tense, they get jumpy, they get sweaty. The body state is crucial to our neurobiology and the state of our memory. And one of the things that we have seen some partners do is actually use Shiftwave in conjunction with what's called exposure therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, let me just state clearly, Shiftwave is a wellness device. We don't purport to treat, diagnose, or cure any disorder. But we do have partners that are using it for persons who've had traumatic experiences. And there is a type of therapy that people use called exposure therapy, where people literally listen to their own narration of of a traumatic experience that's happened to them, right? And they listen to it over and over. And this is intended to calm the affective or the emotional color associated with that memory. We've got some partners that are doing that type of therapy while persons are in the Shiftwave chair because we can facilitate helping the body feel safe and we can facilitate the body being in a calm physiological state to accelerate that sort of affective remodeling, so to speak. So there's lots of cool stuff that can happen when you bring the body into the mental health and high performance world. And much of what's happened over kind of time and history, especially in the West, is we've been very narrative focused. We've been very much tell me your story, tell me your perception of your own mind and things that have gone on. And we come at it in a very cognitive and a very verbal way. And that's important. There's been lots of people's lives who've been saved and transformed as a result of that approach. One of the things that draws me to Shiftwave is that it's a bit of a technological way of instantiating some of the similar practices that have been pursued by more Eastern cultures for millennia. So it's a way that you can incorporate less verbal, but more of a somatic approach to changing the nervous system, especially when you start adding patterned breath work on top of the physical vibrations. There's an opportunity there for to change the physicality and have that also assist in changing the body. So I think we offer a very unique way to scale a somatic approach to high performance and mental wellness.
Yeah, that's one thing I've advise clients on who are working with a psychiatrist on different things is what is your state as you're working through those things? If you feel like your state is becoming like your palms are sweaty, you are very becoming very, for lack of a better word, simplistically, very sympathetic or very stressed. The question I always had is similar to what you were saying is at what point do we cognitively think we're potentially solving some things, which we very might well be, versus how much are we then repeating them and just via neuroplastic changes making it harder to get out of that rut? Like how much are you digging a deeper rut by repeating it versus like you're saying, if we can change the state of the nervous system, we can have it be in a more relaxed state because at the end of the day, we're trying to take that emotional side and just turn down the gain on it because the gain got cranked to 11 and any small thing, it goes from 1 all the way to 11, which is why like using MDMA for PTSD seems to help with different modalities that are respecting the state of the individual and then doing that same type of work, which could be CBT, could be exposure therapy. And even on the exposure therapy, there's super interesting data I'm sure you've seen on the use of beta blockers, right? So chemically, just toning down that whole system, and now it's you. To me, that makes a lot more sense because you're respecting the state of the system. You're trying to maybe artificially induce it to the end result you want to get. And then maybe titrating your way off of that or doing different things. At least to me as an outsider, it seems to make a lot more sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. I'm loving this conversation because that's literally what I had queued up in my brain
Ah,
to talk about was the beta blocker phenomenon. And for those who don't know,
yeah, so talk about that.
yeah, so there's been a number of different ways that groups and people have approached the question of what do we do as psychological first aid for persons who've just had a horribly traumatic experience? Okay. Many, many questions, lots of research, lots of different therapeutic modalities have been tried. And one has been actually shown to be negative. Okay. And that is this. Just by way of background, I used to be the psychiatrist for the New Orleans Police Department during
Hmm.
and a decade after Hurricane Katrina. So I've got a fair amount of experience in like psychological first aid in traumatic and tough situations. And one of the things that's known in that world is that there is actually a negative effect from having debriefings after traumatic experience.
Mm,
Okay. So, like, for example, okay, and I'm just going to make up a hypothetical example. Let's say there was a situation in which a several law enforcement officers were involved in a horrific shooting where there was a hostage and there was innocents who were killed and they were shot at, and let's say they had to defend themselves, they had to kill the perpetrator, right? Horrific situation, right? You can actually induce more PTSD if you take those law enforcement officers immediately after the experience, put them in a room, and make them tell their story of what just happened to them
mm,
and do it over and over. That can actually, for lack of a better term, burn it into their brain
yep.
a bit more and actually make it more likely that they're going to have negative outcomes from that traumatic experience, more likely they're going to have PTSD, etc. Okay. We're learning as we go in civilization. Another thing that has actually been learned is that what you mentioned is that if you take a very different approach, if you take persons who've just had a horrific experience and you provide them safety, you provide them just basic psychological first aid, and if their blood pressure is massively high, if their heart rate is massively high, and their body is still in this like adrenaline dump sympathetic state, that for some, if you provide them a beta blocker, which is a medical term for a medication that basically externally turns down the sympathetic nervous system, makes their body feel safe, then you have less negative outcomes from PTSD. I bring those up because those are the two extremes of the way to approach the nervous system and how sensitive it can be after a traumatic experience. And so I think that that is something that's a bit underappreciated. We're psychiatrists and mental health professionals. We love to talk it all out, but nevertheless, like there is a place for the body for sure. And that's what that medication is attempting to do is provide a external relaxation, not necessarily in the sense of giving like a downer, but just a tweak to the autonomic nervous system to balance the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system in order to have persons become less negative outcomes over time. And there's a number of different ways that this approach has been instantiated. One of the ideas that's come across my desk or my brain recently is that there's been a number of different adepts, yoga gurus, people that have been doing this in India and other places for millennia. And one prominent yoga teacher, BKS Iyengar, who founded Iyengar Yoga, who really brought the kind of physical postures of asana to the West, starting in the 50s and 60s, was that when Westerners would come to him and start talking about their traumas or their depression or their more mental health symptoms, he actually would have them stop talking and then immediately put them into kind of back bending postures where they would
Hmm.
open up their chest, they would open
So
their heart.
anti-flexion. Yeah.
Exactly. And so to use that as a kind of a parasympathetic change to their nervous system, I think is just another example of how there's lots of ways to approach nervous system changing. And I think we here in the West are starting to learn the benefit of a body-centered or breath-centered practice.
And I think there's some data showing if you have a traumatic experience or high stressor event and you don't get enough REM sleep, I think it's that night or the night before or after that your risk of PTS or PTSD is super high, which kind of coincides with that staying in that high sympathetic state. It's very difficult to sleep in that state also. So maybe there's any thoughts on just the sleep component and the processing that goes on in sleep to try to get back to baseline?
Yeah, very much. And not everybody, but many people are wearing their Aura rings and
Yeah, I got Aura and Garmin, all sorts of stuff.
they're tracking their sleep and they're taking a look at their percentage of time in REM sleep and deep sleep. Okay. And of course, it's you don't want to have an obsession about this. Love some grace and understand, but it's important to look at both of those metrics. Deep sleep is truly where the body and the physicality of the brain does most of its repair, its anti-inflammation, its flushing out of the glymphatic system. That's what's kind of, you're repairing the physicality of the body, right? But REM sleep is interesting because REM sleep is the same process, but you're doing that to make sense and package up what's happened to you in the day neurobiologically into into the existing coherent network of brain cells and information that is already stored in your brain. So essentially what you're doing is you're taking the day and you're making sense of it, packaging it up, and then filing it away into the sum total of your life experience. And one of the purposes of that is actually to place the appropriate amount of emotional context onto your memories. Okay. And so by placing that context in your memories and being able to integrate it into the larger sphere and autobiographical memory of your life, you're able to make more sense of what has happened to you. But in PTSD and other types of traumatic experiences, these memories aren't as integrated. And that means that their affect is just there waiting to go, just like you were there in the situation. And REM sleep is crucially important for kind of turning that affect down to the memory and placing it in a larger context. So a person can say, yes, that was a horrible thing that happened to me, an absolutely horrible thing, but it's not the only thing that's happened to me. It's part of a larger life, and I'm generally safe even though this horrific thing has happened to me. That memory consolidation and affective repackaging is very much what happens in REM sleep. And so then the obvious question comes, all right, what do I do to help with my sleep? Right? How do I make sure that my sleep is actually supporting me both in the physicality renewal as well as in the neurobiological emotional renewal? And there's lots of things that go into sleep. I'm happy to talk about that as well. But one of the drivers of getting into sleep is actually what's the state of your nervous system when you lay down, when you do your bedtime ritual, when you go to sleep at hopefully the right time, similar times every night. If you go in there and your heart rate is 20% higher than well, you're not going to go right to sleep. And so one of the, I think the things that we are exploring with Shiftwave is to what extent can Shiftwave assist in bringing down the state of the nervous system to prepare you for a better night's sleep. And so we've got some ongoing research with the some branches of the US military that will allow us to answer that question with a bit more data. So stay tuned.
Yeah, and I've used the short, even just the, I think it's a 7-minute protocol you can use like immediately before sleep. And that's been super helpful, even just in the short 7 minutes of, and I think a lot of it is the kind of the ritual too of, okay, I'm going to do this and then do this. And on that protocol, it's very, leaves you in that sort of down-regulated state also, which I found has been super helpful for sleep. And at least on, I have another device that does some tracking stuff. Just using the shift wave during the day, I saw my deep sleep actually go up quite a bit. My REM sleep dropped a little bit. And then since I've been down here, I haven't used it for the last 3 or 4 days. They inverted back again, which was interesting. So even just using it during the day, at least on one device, I saw a pretty big increase in deep sleep, which I thought was interesting. So maybe there's some maybe entrainment or maybe my overall state is a little bit more down regulated. So when I do get to sleep, I can get better sleep. I'm not really sure how that works, but I thought that was pretty interesting of what I've observed so far.
Yeah. You're certainly not the first to tell us that they've seen
Mm.
changes in their personal tracking on sleep, both duration as well as quality and the different time dwelt in different stages. And again, we have very early pilot data on all of this, but I think these effects are why our little startup company has gotten a lot of attention from not just professional sports teams and not just high performers, but also organizations that are looking to help fund the research to help us truly understand what are the depth of the effects that we have here so that that can be more easily replicatable and extended to high performing, high stress occupations.
And you even have protocols that are called synthetic sleep. Do you want to explain a little bit about those? Because they seem to be, at least from experiential and just a little bit I've read about it, is they seem to be different from a lot, some of the other protocols.
They are. Synthetic sleep is one of our trademarks, and we know that it's a pretty bold thing to say, right? Uh,
Yeah.
but part of the reason we can be so bold as to call these protocols part of the synthetic sleep protocols is that this isn't just woo-woo. This isn't just a bunch of people in a wellness company making up stuff that
That
sell a
never
product.
happens in fitness. What are you
Oh, of
talking
course
about?
not, my boy. This is actually like what we saw in the psychophysiology lab when we were like, in the early stages, development, prototype stage. Basically, one of the things that we have seen that does need to be more replicated and does need to be more officially studied, but we've seen a very interesting phenomenon in some of our different patterns. Okay. So basically, we have certain protocols that we call synthetic sleep that use particular patterns of physical vibration that are that take a person beyond relaxed. Okay. So, of course, you sit in these protocols, your mind's churning, you just had a day, or you just had a thing, or you're circadian disrupted, or you're sleep deprived, or you're jet lagged, or whatever. You come and sit down, and then With these protocols, we can actually start to see, yes, over time, your sympathetic nervous system calms down, your heart rate variability starts to get big. We see that you're in training, and then you start breathing along with the vibrations. And 15 minutes or so into it, we can start to see some other very interesting physiological things start to happen. Okay. And so what we've seen in our lab is that we've actually seen that we can start to affect not just your psychophysiological state. Like we've got you very parasympathetic, we've got you very relaxed. Deep into that, we start to see that we can start to entrain delta, but more sub-delta EEG
Hmm.
activity, which are slow waves in the EEG signal. And for those who you may not know, this is the lowest frequency of brain waves that are usually seen during deep stages of sleep. So we can basically literally calm the state of your brain down to some of its lowest settings. And what happens when your brain actually calms down to those low settings is, and this is from other research, like literally your brain physically shrinks.
Hmm.
Okay. Not a lot, maybe 10% in overall volume, because your brain's working a little bit less. Similar to a muscle. If you're working that muscle, there's going to be a pump and that muscle is going to get a little bit larger. Your brain cells are similar. If they're
Hmm.
fire, if on in aggregate, if they're firing a little bit less, like they're not they don't swell up as much, and so overall in that effect you can have a brain shrink by 10% in overall volume. That's a big deal when you're
Yeah.
inside of a skull. So what happens? Your brain fills, there's more cerebrospinal fluid that starts going around the brain and then through the brain, but we actually start to see that we can induce these large pressure changes in relative cerebrospinal fluid. We saw that in our lab. And we start to see some early indications that that fluid might be being pushed through the cranial cavity and then coming
Hmm.
out of the lymphatic system, which suggests that we may, and we need to do some confirmatory research on this. This is really cutting edge stuff, but we may be opening up the glymphatic system.
Hmm.
And what that means is that's a way that your brain is actually taking an oil change. We're flushing it out and we're able to let the cerebrospinal fluid bathe out and reduce toxins from the brain. Okay, that's what we suspect is happening during these synthetic sleeps. There's a lot more confirmatory research to do, et cetera, et cetera. But the point is, we think that that's evidence that we're actually able to induce something that the yoga tradition calls yoga nidra. Okay.
Yeah.
Huberman, I believe, calls it non
Non-sleep deep rest.
non-sleep deep
Yeah.
rest.
Same thing.
Same phenomenon, that we're able to help people get into a state where they are awake, super duper relaxed, but their brain and their body are starting to have physiological signatures that are more like sleep, especially deep sleep, than are like waking, ready to go state. And so that is very interesting. We have some research projects taking a bit more look at that. We know that those are some bold claims, but nevertheless, we think we're onto something there with the synthetic sleeps. So in other words, we're able to help guide a person with no experience in yoga nidra who has maybe some difficulty getting into these non-sleep deep rest states. We're able to help guide it to them haptically while they synchronize their breathing with our patterns, and we're able to entrain them down into that state. And what we've heard anecdotally is that getting into that state is both physically and mentally restorative. And so we've got a number of different like customers that use those synthetic sleep protocols for circadian disruption, jet lag, times when they know they haven't gotten enough regular sleep to perhaps augment and get a little bit of that deep brain restoration in a very compact way the next day. Lots to come, a lot of research, but we think we're onto something there with these synthetic sleep protocols.
Yeah, and it feels very different, like it's a different state. It's relaxing, but you're not completely out of it. You're aware, but it's a very different sensation for sure. And I've also noticed when you get done with it, you put the little visor up and you're, oh, where am I? What's what's going on again? You're briefly a little bit like, oh yeah, I'm in a chair in my living room. That's right.
It's like being in a between state in some respects. Some
hmm
You're not asleep, so you're not unconscious. You're not waking up responding to emails. You're somewhere in that liminal space, they call it, that is where wakefulness is bleeding into sleep and you're dancing in that middle ground there.
What about thoughts for, so one of the things I thought about for athletic performance is if you believe that say strength is a skill, which Pavel Tsatsouline has been very famous for saying, which I would tend to agree. There's a lot of motor learning when you're trying to do a thing, not just muscular output. About having like post training, like a synthetic sleep type protocol. Do you think there is a increased amount of motor learning that would stay because you're maybe having that better consolidation period or simulation of REM or just down regulating post high sort of sympathetic states? Any thoughts around that?
Ultimately, it's a kind of a little bit of an empirical question that we have yet to test. Okay.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
There has been research showing that even naps, like after
Right.
learning learning new skills or performing skills, even these naps have been shown to help with kind of skill acquisition and consolidation. So I think that is a quite likely scenario that Shiftwave would be able to provide a similar experience, especially in these very calming synthetic sleep protocols. We'd love to test that theory, but I've got every reason to hypothesize that we would be doing a very similar thing. And and partially we can leverage the fact that again, Huberman also talks about this, that you can use bilateral stimulation or cross-body stimulation to also help induce neuroplasticity. And we've got some
hmm
protocols that specifically work on that in that direction. So there's a lot to research here, but yeah, I think that there is a quite I would love to test that theory, but I've got every reason to hypothesize and feel optimistic about that outcome. Especially, I think the research shows that 30 minutes or so within 30 minutes after learning a new skill can be or finish practicing a new skill is the optimal window.
Yeah, and I've used I think the NeuroBoost does that. I think it's trying to, so my thought was, and correct me if I'm on the right track, is doing like the NeuroBoost protocol beforehand to try to increase the neuroplasticity, doing whatever the skill thing you're doing, and then doing some type of synthetic sleep or a small nap. Like one of my favorite ones is the disco nap, and there's 10 minutes of a synthetic sleep at the end of that. So trying to bookend training with one, doing a little bit more upregulation, more trying to increase neuroplasticity, doing the thing that you want to learn, and then trying to downregulate, maybe try to consolidate some of those new pathways via LTP or whatever the mechanism actually is there might be beneficial. And my backup thought was it's not really going to be a negative. Like I definitely haven't seen a negative to it. I don't know of anything where that would be a net downside. There's just only potential upside.
Yeah, I agree. I think that only has a likelihood of success as opposed to I don't think it would hurt your skill acquisition.
Right. It's not going to make you worse.
Make it worse. And then, of course, it it would be very interesting to see how that would pair with combined mental rehearsal, right?
Yes, that was my other thought was do you run the tasks that you were doing while you're doing the synthetic sleep? So one of the things I played with is visualization, whether it's first person or third person, while I'm in that state. And I think it was that Stephen Kotler referred to this study where and I can't find this study, but it was that the Navy SEALs were trying to learn a different language and they put them in a float tank and they had a way of teaching them in this parasympathetic state, and their learning was like 60 or 40% greater. I can't find the study, but it sounds really cool, and it would make sense maybe.
Right. Then that all makes a lot of sense. And actually, DARPA has taken a look at something similar to this
Mm,
question. And one of the things that DARPA has basically found in the past 5, maybe 10 years, more like 5 years, is that a- activities that induce higher vagal tone, higher tone in the vagus nerve as a kind of chief output of the parasympathetic nervous system, that these devices and practices actually improve cognition, improve memory, and improve overall brain learning, memory, retention, be it facts or be it procedures. And so they've actually invested a lot and have taken a lot of look at vagal nerve stimulation.
yeah.
Dr. Kevin Tracy has done some of this work, and there's lots of Dr. Renneker, I believe, out of UT Dallas. So there's a lot of people that have taken a look at how stimulation or enhancement of the parasympathetic nervous system activity can actually be not just a body calmer, but also a brain enhancer. And one of the things that I think, and again, it's an empirical question, but one of the things that we certainly see with Shiftwave is that we can be a massive change to the parasympathetic nervous system. We can see large scale changes in heart rate variability, even though we're not directly stimulating the vagus nerve.
Hmm.
But nevertheless, by activating the sympathetic nervous system at particular times, we induce the vagus nerve to become more active. Not unlike a parent pushing a child on a swing at the right times with the right force, the child can swing up and swing a little higher and swing a little higher. And so we see that in our psychophysiological data. And so there's every reason to think that we could also be as a pleasurable, non-invasive, non-electrostimulation way that we could also be inducing some of those effects as well. Really, this, from a science standpoint, this is the ship that could launch 1,000 PhDs, and we're just stoked to have started this journey of how can bringing the body stimulation, how can bringing the somatic stimulation in a definable, profound, and repeated way, how this can enhance not just the reducing muscle tension in your body, but also assist in overall cognitive performance and well-being.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I like too is that, and I played with some of the vagal nerve sims and mixed results on them. And in a previous life, many years ago, I worked for a medical device company that did implantable pacemakers and defibrillators. And so one of the things that I would go over and pester the guys in research about is that they were looking at vagal nerve stims back then, like the early 2000s, and they had filed some patents from like 1976 on trying to do leads, and the big issue was how do you get a wire to get around the nerve reliably via procedure to do it. But they showed all sorts of early benefits to obesity, depression, like all sorts of stuff. But I've always wondered with that, it seems like every time we do, not every time, but a lot of times we do direct stimulation, the body tends to tone down the response over time. Where I've wondered with like Shiftwave, where you're doing more of a, I don't know if primitive is the right word, but more of a reliable signal with the mechanoreceptive stimulation. Because I also think about, I have some friends who work in a lot of functional neurology. So I'm a social professor at the Carrick Institute. They do a lot of clinical neuroscience stuff. And we know after concussion or TBI, a lot of your eye responses, your vestibular system gets rewired, but it doesn't seem to me that proprioception mechanostim gets rewired nearly as much. Any thoughts on that? That maybe it's at just this lower, more hardwired level where if you give a signal to it, it's more reliable across a wider variety of people. So therefore, doing that as a intervention, you can more reliably get to these states in a wide variety of people from all sorts of normal conditions, from athletes to potentially even pathologies.
Yeah,
I know
I
it's a
think
very long worded, weird question.
I like long-worded weird questions. Yeah. So I think that it's a very natural pathway, okay? It, so that is the mechanoreceptor way of putting in information into the body. And that is like something that we activate, I think, not enough in regular, normal, Western information heavy life. So for example, the walking. That's a rhythmic assist and powerful change, and there's a shock wave that happens through our body. Running obviously puts a repetitive shock wave through our body, and these are some of the most natural acts that a human can do. You take a look at some of the research around more indigenous cultures that have the cultures of running, the Born to Run book, and all of that.
Hmm.
There's something profound about that repetitive physical stimulation of running that I don't think is there in some other exercises. Okay. So you take that. Also, you take a look at how we're actually created, right? So think about it. Like when we are basically forming in utero, right? What are we in? We're in a fluid-filled sac that is being subjected to a constant symphony of physical vibrations. We've got mom's voice, we've got mom's breathing, we've got mom's heartbeat, we've got mom walking. And so we're naturally like that's probably our first sensations that help us understand who we are and what's the state of our body. Like, and this is how mom can know that mom will wake up and then she can feel the baby inside of her start to wake up. There's a communication of safety and things that are happening there. And so I guess what I'm saying is that these are very natural pathways that are providing that information into the body. It's very different than electrical stimulation that has to be, and then the vagus nerve is complex, right? If you want to learn more about this, I suggest a book called The Great Nerve, which talks
Mm.
about how different literally frequencies and kind of voltage changes on the vagus nerve stimulator can have different effects, right? So you got to be very precise when you're using that degree of direct electrical stim. But there's a whole way that you can stimulate the body through different patterns of natural vibration above and beyond in a shift wave chair. And then finally, like one of the things that I think is very not coincidental is that the patterns of physical vibration that we saw in the lab that had the most kind of effect on sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system, all this. It's it's probably not a coincidence that we saw interesting effects at breath rates that were lower, slower, and perhaps in tune with both resonance frequency breath and subharmonics of that.
Hmm.
What do I mean by that? Let me take a little brief foray into some science stuff. Everybody's got a particular rate of breathing that is lower than normal breathing, but if you can do it and do it comfortably, you're actually synchronizing a number of the different control mechanisms over over your heart rate.
So
So
this would be like a coherence effect, like some stuff the Heart Math Institute has done and related
exactly.
things.
Yeah, very similar.
Okay.
Yes. For most people, it's around 4.5 to 7.5 breaths per minute. So let's just call it six breaths per minute. So if you're breathing at 6 breaths per minute, which is difficult to do, but you're basically then providing the opportunity for a much larger parasympathetic nervous system output to your heart and to the rest of your organs, most likely. So I don't think it's coincidence that we can actually see very interesting shift wave effects when we gently get persons to breathe at 6 breaths a minute, or even half that. So
Hmm.
you go down to breathing 3 breaths a minute, deeply, slowly, and comfortably. So I think we're leveraging existing psychophysiological kind of resonances in the body. But finally, I bring that up because that's a little bit of that's a transferable skill, different from electrostimulation. So if you learn repeatedly that you can actually affect the state of your nervous system by breathing at this kind of very comfortable but deep and slow rate that you used in the Shiftwave device, that's something you can take with you when you're in traffic or when your boss is yelling at you or you're out there in the world. And one other thing that Shiftwave does is we actually offer an opportunity to change our device into a haptic biofeedback mode, okay,
Mm.
called BioDrive. We include with the device a research grades pulse sensor that you place on your finger, and then we actually allow, through a certain algorithm, the state and the fluctuations in your heart rate to then control the vibrations in the chair. And so it takes a little bit of practice, but once you get it, then basically your own kind of change, you can feel the change in your nervous system. And that feeling and that change is much greater when you are down at these resonance frequency breaths or even subharmonics of it. Like you can change it a little bit when you're breathing 11, 12, 13 breaths a minute, but the real profound changes come when you breathe deeply, longly, and slowly. And so in that sense, we become this reinforcement experience where you can physically feel the effects of your nervous system in this haptic biofeedback way. That's my favorite stuff, by the way. And so there's a lot of development we're doing on that, certainly more to come to expand that. But yeah, we offer a very haptic way of feeling that change in your nervous system and letting you interact with it. Cool stuff.
So if that is on, and does it, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you can put that on any protocol. So you would not, would you recommend starting it with like maybe one of the synthetic sleeps that doesn't have an auditory protocol? Because then you would be using your breathing rate to try to drive the vibration so that it's not out of sync from what the normal program would be.
Yeah, no. So we have a couple of different protocols that are there specifically to teach people how to do this.
Mm.
Okay. One is called HRV BioDrive Intro.
Mm-hmm.
It gets you breathing in a certain pattern that's probably pretty close to your resonance frequency, although it all changes individually and even has a little bit of state change. And then we basically, in the middle of that protocol, hand the control to you.
Mm.
We switch from a passive protocol to a biofeedback protocol and then back again. So we have a couple of
Mm.
different protocols that help teach you that to kind of learn how to have that skill. Yeah.
And what are some of the other protocols if people were to use that? Are there any names like the BioDrive if they want to use it on a different protocol, like good starting points?
Yeah, there's another one that we have called longevity,
Mm.
which does a very similar thing where it basically is going to entrain is going to get your attention and start to relax you. And then at a certain point, you'll hear a bell, and that's a signal that we've handed over the control, so to speak, to the.
Oh, that's why that's in there. Because I
Yep.
emailed Danny and I said, yeah, I love that longevity protocol, but there's this loud bell that comes on 5 times. What the hell is that thing in there for? It scared the crap out of me the first time. I'm like, there has to be a reason because my perception is everything I felt feels like everything is very methodical and very much done for a reason. So I'm like, I'm sure there's a reason that thing is there. So,
That's the reason, my friend. So yeah, next time do it with the PPG sensor on, and then it will know that it's then time to let you let the turn on the haptic biofeedback mode.
so when I hear that noise, that means that it's basically allowing you, the user, to drive it with your breathing until the next one, then, is that right?
Correct. It's a cue that we've now engaged the biodrive mode.
Okay. Awesome. Very cool.
And so in that sense, I think that a lot of the direction of wellness, the direction of even healthcare certainly cutting edge longevity healthcare, but even some of the more regular stuff is really moving in many ways towards personalization, right? I know that there is a lot we are going to explore and release to the public around how Shiftwave can be a personalized adaptive biofeedback mode so that the protocols are actually being informed by and adjusting to the state of your nervous system in the moment. So stay tuned. There's a lot of cool stuff we have in beta that will be coming out soon.
Yeah, because I would imagine you could very easily, nothing's easy, but you could because you have HRV, you've got pulse ox, you've got the ability to make changes real fast. You could even keep it very simple. Just do a 3 minute HRV analysis. Oh, you're very sympathetic. Okay, so we're going to do more of a parasympathetic protocol. So you type in how do you feel, length of time you can do. Maybe there's some data showing even a 60-second HRV analysis can be accurate. And then it just goes off and does its thing for your goal, like maybe down regulation, up regulation, sleep, or whatever. And then you just hit the button and away it goes and it finds the best protocol for you in the background.
Your intuition is fairly accurate. I'll just say that, but definitely stay tuned. We've got some really cool personalized adaptive stuff that we're working on in the background and we'll be releasing soon.
Awesome. Very last question as we wrap up. I really appreciate all your time here. This is a very selfish question. If somebody has a Shiftwave chair, what would be your recommendations to get the most out of it? I'm primarily asking for myself right now while I'm using it. If their goal is more longevity, general health, more of a performance type angle, is there things you're like, oh, you should definitely try this or that protocol, or what would be just your recommendations?
Yeah. So my recommendations would be to find a way to integrate it into your daily life and your daily habits. We have seen some internal data that's pretty off the charts and around what daily use can do in terms of not just of nervous system, but of physical positive effects. Okay. More to come on that. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but so number one, do it every day. Doesn't need to be an hour, but we can see some really interesting benefits accumulate from even shorter sessions that are frequent, and that aligns with a lot of research. That's number one. Number two, as I mentioned, I think that there is an interesting value add from doing some of these biodrive protocols so that you get a sense of kind of how you are controlling and affecting the state of your nervous system so that you're not just a passive observer being regulated by Shiftwave, but that you're a co-participant in that. And I think that there is some added extra benefit to that for sure. And then finally, the most important part of it is have fun. Like this is meant to lets you experience the joy of shifting your psychophysiological state. And I think that that is one of our value adds is that it's just not another darn thing to do for my wellness. It feels good. If you want to not biodrive one day and you want to explore a new protocol, just do it. Like keep that variety. We've got 60 protocols right now, and we are continuously developing more and pushing them out. Just keep it fun. So keep it fun, experience biodrive, but find a way to work it into your experience daily are my three big recommendations.
Is there a time point you found that because a lot of stuff in physiology is not linear, right? So I would imagine, yeah, 5 minutes a day better than none. 20 minutes better, 60 minutes. If somebody just has unlimited time, is there like an inflection point where you're like, oh, if you can get to 20 or 30 minutes a day, it's much better, or any guidance on sort of total time?
Yeah, I think that there is, if you can, I think 30 minutes a day is the sweet spot. Okay.
Okay, cool.
Because what when we mentioned earlier the synthetic sleep protocols that and we talked about potential for glymphatic opening and the delta and subdelta slow wave EEG changes and potential that we're moving brain fluid around and all that. That's not something that happens immediately. Like
Right.
you've got to be not just physically relaxed, but then also very mentally relaxed, literally, so that your brain can calm down a bit to achieve that change in that state. We don't see that in the first 10 minutes, even during the
Mm-hmm.
synthetic sleep protocols, right? So I would say that doing shift wave long enough to let your body calm down, shift your autonomic nervous system, and then experience that ineffable third phase. I think that 30 minutes is kind of the sweet spot for doing that. But again, something's better than nothing. If you've
Sure.
got 15 minutes, it's certainly better to do that than it is to scroll again on your phone.
Yeah.
And I think that is yeah, so that would be my recommendation there.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I found for getting myself to do it is just I just have to sit in the chair, and once I'm in the chair, I'll go through and I'll do the breathing things. You can do a guided protocol where I think sometimes the inertia to do meditation and to do other things, the same thing I tell clients at training. Just go to the gym. If you're going to do something on the rower, like for week one, just do 2 minutes. Like your job is just to show up and put your butt on the rower. If you did 30 seconds, it's still a win over nothing. Like you could argue you're not going to get a ton of benefit from that, but over time, you're building the habit, you're doing it, and your time spent will increase. So I've noticed just being able to just get in the chair and then do something is going to be a net benefit overall for sure.
Exactly. And life happens.
Oh, for sure.
That's just the nature of the beast. But making a commitment to do a practice, even if it's small, even if it's not your full in-depth practice, just to do that every day, I think it's a very powerful way to let benefits compound and keep the state of your own nervous system as one of your kind of higher priorities in your days, even on the rough ones, even on the busy ones, even in the ones with back-to-backs.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Where can people learn more about you if you want to be found? And we'll put a link to the Shiftwave website, any other resources, anything else people should do if they're interested.
Yeah, I would say that the best way to learn about it is to go to our website, which is shiftwave.co, not .com, .co, C-O. But also check us out on YouTube. I believe our handle is at Shiftwave Pro, all one word. And when you go to that website, you'll of course see testimonials and people using Shiftwave in a number of different locations. But you'll also see some of my kind of favorite stuff around Shiftwave, where you'll see actually reactions from some of our humanitarian work, where we've been able to get Shiftwaves donated into mental health centers, Ukrainian army, and children's trauma camps in Ukraine. So you can see we're not just a wellness company that's like there to sell a bunch of products, right? Like we're actually on a mission to help provide nervous system resets and help people. So you can really see some of that work and see there. It's not, you're not hearing it from company people. You're
Yeah.
seeing the reaction for people using the shift waves in rough situations. So check us out on YouTube is my recommendation.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all your time. I really appreciate it. And this has been great. Thank you so much.
Awesome. This has been awesome. I love these high bandwidth, deeply nerdy conversations.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. Huge thanks to Dr. Jeff Rouse for being on the podcast. I really, really appreciate his chat here today over a wide range of topics involving the nervous system, how you can upregulate, downregulate, the benefits of that, and how the Shiftwave device is working to maximize those. If you are interested in more stuff from myself, check out my newsletter. I go to the link down below. You can hop on to the newsletter link for free. If you are interested in all things Shiftwave, I do have an affiliate link down below, so I do make a few clams if you decide to purchase through that. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me directly. More than happy to help you. If I'm not able to answer it, I can definitely pass you on to the correct person to give you an answer. Again, huge thanks to Dr. Jeff for all of his time, and to everyone at Shiftwave there for doing really, really great stuff. I've been overly impressed with everybody there that I've interacted with. As I said in the intro, I have been able to use the device for about 6 weeks now, and it's been super, super useful. There's still new stuff I'm figuring out with it. We liked it so much we stuck it in the SUV and took it all the way down here to South Padre, Texas, where we're at right now, recording this, and it's been super helpful down here, doing some demos for some other people also. If you're interested in it, check it out, and if you have questions for me, please hit me up. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. We really appreciate it. You could give us a thumbs up, a like, subscribe. The subscription, especially on YouTube, is super helpful. Any reviews, all the great stuff that helps the algorithms. It really helps us out so we can continue to get great guests like this. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And we'll talk to all of you next week.
There's something wrong with this hearing aid.
Yeah, what's wrong?
And I can't hear with it.
Oh, no wonder. It's too far away.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. The podcast is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. You should not use the information on the podcast for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease or prescribing any medication or other treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider before taking any medication or nutritional supplement, and with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this or any other podcast. Reliance on the podcast is solely at your own risk. Information provided on the podcast does not create a doctor-patient relationship between you and any of the health professionals affiliated with our podcast. Information and statements regarding dietary supplements are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to therein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.